Why are you, a total stranger, staying in our house for so long? My sister-in-law scolded me angrily. After losing my beloved husband, I continued living with my in-laws. Wasn't I allowed to be there? I never thought you were this kind of woman. Leave as soon as possible, she insisted. Even my usually kind mother-in-law began criticizing me harshly. If that's how it was, I'd leave on my own. These were the words screamed in my heart, but I suppressed them. I understand, I said while vowing revenge. My name is Gina, and I am 40 years old. I work as an elementary school teacher. My husband, James, also an elementary school teacher at a different school, was 42 that year. We were married for 12 years. We met at the first elementary school I worked at after graduating from college. James, 2 years my senior, was a reliable senior colleague who taught me various things about school life. Through work, we were drawn to each other and eventually got married. I loved children and became a teacher to spend time with them, but sadly, we didn't have any children. My father-in-law passed away in his 50s before we got married, and James lived with his mother until I joined the family. Thanks to the real estate and other assets inherited from my father-in-law, my mother-in-law was financially secure. However, since the beginning of our marriage, we had decided to pay $2,000 monthly to my in-laws. We had a dream we wanted to realize. Despite needing to save for it, we regularly transferred money to my in-laws for utilities, food, and a small rent out of a sense of duty. We continued to work as teachers, increasingly worried about the growing number of children not attending school. Our dream was to establish a learning center where such children could study comfortably. James's older sister, Mary, who is 3 years older than him, is married and lives in another state. My sister-in-law's son left home last spring for studies, so it should be just the two of them now. Although living about an hour's drive away, my sister-in-law visited every weekend, asking my mother-in-law for financial help. My son's tuition is short. Can you help a little? My sister-in-law would softly ask. Really? It can't be helped. How much do you need? My mother-in-law would spoil my sister-in-law. For some reason, James couldn't understand why. Frustrated, he finally asked his sister one day, "You received a fair amount from Dad's inheritance, right? Why are you always short of money?" he asked incredulously. My sister-in-law then retaliated. "You don't have any kids, so you wouldn't understand. Raising children is incredibly expensive. You talk about inheritance, but that money can't last forever." However, my sister-in-law's spending was clearly excessive, even in my eyes. Once she asked for money for education, another time for home repairs, and before that for food. Every time, my mother-in-law would give my sister-in-law a considerable amount. I couldn't understand why. That day, we went to our respective schools as usual. An ordinary morning, the usual scenery, until that phone call. I received news that James had collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. Urged to hurry there, I exclaimed in shock, "What?" My husband collapsed. Confused, but upon reaching the hospital, I found James unconscious, and he had to undergo thorough examinations. I wished it was all a bad dream, but despite aggressive treatment, James passed away that night. Faced with this unexpected event, I didn't even have time to cry. Immediately taking leave from work to arrange the funeral, I felt I couldn't mentally survive otherwise. My mother-in-law, likely more heartbroken than me, courteously received the mourners throughout the funeral. It was an opportunity to meet my sister-in-law's family again, my sister-in-law, husband Robert, and their son Alex, who was a college student, helped devotedly. However, my sister-in-law herself didn't seem to grieve over her own brother's death. It almost seemed like she was happy about it. After James's funeral, I returned to my mother-in-law's house. My sister-in-law's family said they had other things to do and went home without dropping by. Then, my mother-in-law spoke quietly, "Gina, I never thought being bereaved of my son would be this lonely." Hearing these words, my pent-up sadness burst out, and I broke down crying. "If it's okay with you, Gina, would you stay in this house forever? I'm lonely living by myself." My mother-in-law spoke kindly to me. Let's support each other from now on, Mother, I replied, wiping away my tears. However, more troubles followed just as we decided to live together. My mother-in-law suddenly collapsed. It might have been due to the grief of losing her son. She was diagnosed with a stroke. Fortunately, she survived but was left with paralysis in her right side. I wish to continue living in this house. There are so many memories here. I want to spend my time here, she said with slightly slurred speech but with determination. I'm fine, so please continue to focus on your work, Gina, my mother-in-law kindly told me. However, I was worried about leaving my half-paralyzed mother-in-law alone at home. We decided to use long-term care insurance for home care with the help of a helper. Even after James passed away, I continued to contribute $2,000 monthly for my mother-in-law. However, my sister-in-law started visiting her mother more frequently. I'm just worried about Mom, my sister-in-law said. But could anyone understand this? From past experiences, I felt I shouldn't easily believe my sister-in-law's words. My mother-in-law, having lost her mobility and feeling weak, asked, Gina, Mary wants to live here with us. What do you think? Mary wants to too? What about her husband? I asked in surprise. Alex is already in college and not at home. She says it's okay for her to live here alone. Her husband might move here eventually too, my mother-in-law explained. I felt uneasy and asked frankly, if you think it's good, I won't oppose it. But what about me? What are you saying, Jeanette? You're like a daughter to me. It's totally fine for you to be here, my mother-in-law assured me. However, if my sister-in-law actually moved into the house, I wouldn't be able to stop her like James did. This left me with unresolved anxiety. Amid these concerns, I had to leave the house for a week-long training, leaving my mother-in-law's care to the helper. Mother, I'll be away for a week from tomorrow, so please follow the helper's instructions, I said, trying to sound lighthearted to ease my mother-in-law's anxiety. Don't give money to Mary if she comes, and if something seems odd, contact her husband too. I was very worried about the possibility of my sister-in-law visiting the house during her absence. I couldn't concentrate on my training because of this worry. Upon returning home after a week, I was greeted by my sister-in-law. Welcome back. Mom wants to talk to you. My sister-in-law looked at me with a smug smile. I had an ominous feeling entering the living room. My mother-in-law looked at me with a displeased expression. I'm back, I greeted timidly, overwhelmed by the atmosphere. Gina, were you trying to kick me out and put me in a facility? My mother-in-law suddenly accused me with anger. Confused by the situation, my sister-in-law chimed in, Hey Gina, remember what you said before? You said, I want to put Mom in a facility. It's too much to handle her, didn't you? She continued as if I had said such a thing. It's okay, since you're a stranger anyway. I'll take care of Mom from now on. So you don't need to be here anymore, my sister-in-law said to me with a deliberately harsh face. My mother-in-law also showed her anger, screaming at me with a fierce look. I can't believe it. You're a nuisance. Just leave quickly. Understood. I will leave. With no strength to argue back, I held back my tears and started packing my belongings, leaving behind the items filled with memories of James. I took only the essentials and left the house. Thank you for everything, I said at the entrance, to which my sister-in-law, eager to drive me out, said, You're still here? Leave quickly. A mix of sadness and frustration greatly disturbed my heart. Being driven out of the house, I returned to my parents' home without notice. What happened, Gina? What's with the luggage? My mother couldn't hide her surprise at my sudden return. Sorry for the suddenness, but right now, I don't want to talk about it. I'll go to work from here, so please leave me alone for a while. The room I used to occupy at my parents' house was now empty. I laid down the luggage on the floor and gazed at the ceiling, letting my thoughts wander. What did my sister-in-law plan to do with her own family? My mother-in-law had mentioned that Robert might eventually move in with her, but I never sensed such intentions from my sister-in-law. I wanted to think it was none of my business anymore, but I couldn't stay silent when I thought of my mother-in-law. Then, I remembered something. The day before James collapsed, he tried to tell me something and was about to hand me an envelope, but he was called away by his mother, and I never got to hear about the envelope from him. What could be inside it? Could it be a will? I was worried. Hesitantly, I opened the envelope and checked its contents. Seeing what was inside the envelope, I was astonished. The next day, I left for work from my parents' house, reported my training to the principal, returned to my duties, and ended the day as if nothing had happened. "Excuse me, I'm leaving now," I said as I prepared to leave. And a colleague said to me, "You must be tired from the training. It must have been tough losing your husband. Don't overdo it." However, the reason I was in a hurry to get home wasn't due to fatigue or the sorrow of James' death. I needed to contact Robert and ask about the situation with my sister-in-law. Considering it might turn into a serious conversation, I was hesitant to use my personal phone in a public place where anyone could overhear. On my way home, I sent an email to Robert expressing my desire to talk to him in person. "I have something to talk about regarding my wife too," Robert replied immediately. When I got home, I locked myself in my room and called Robert. He seemed to have been waiting for my call and responded immediately. "Gina, I'm glad. I was just about to contact you." Robert started with a relieved voice. I told him about Mary staying at her mother's house and went on to explain that she was making false claims. "Oh, you are?" my mother said, surprised at Robert's sudden appearance. "Yes, he's the husband of my late husband's sister." "Mom, you've met him before, haven't you?" I explained. My mother couldn't immediately recall who he was, but eventually remembered. "Yes, I've seen him before." Seeing my mother's realization and joy, I explained, "Actually, I wanted to consult him about my husband's family matters." After leading Robert to the living room and briefly exchanging greetings, I took out an envelope. "I want you to see this." The envelope contains several photos and a report. As I spread the photos and the report in front of Robert, he exclaimed in surprise, "What is this?" The photos showed my sister-in-law with a young man enjoying herself at a nightclub and heading to a hotel. The report from a detective agency detailed evidence of my sister-in-law's expenses. James entrusted this to me before he passed away, and since he died before we could discuss it, I had only recently looked at it. I explained the situation to Robert. James had suspected his sister of reckless spending and had secretly commissioned an investigation intending to discuss the results with me. But he passed away before he could. Robert trembled with anger at the photos. I thought she was frequently leaving the house, but to think she was doing this. With a sigh full of indignation, Robert said, "Gina, can you come with me right now? This situation can't be ignored." I had intended to do so from the start and nodded immediately. 30 minutes later, we arrived at my mother-in-law's house and rang the doorbell. "It's Gina." "I've come as promised," I said, and soon heard my sister-in-law's annoyed voice. "How long do you plan to make me wait?" The sound of unlocking the door came, and the door opened. "Come in," my sister-in-law greeted us. But upon seeing Robert, she tried to close the door. Robert quickly grabbed the doorknob. "Mary, we need to talk. Can you listen for a moment?" he said, holding the door. His voice was calm, but his anger was palpable. My sister-in-law struggled to close the door, but couldn't overpower the man's strength, and eventually had to leave it open. "Fine, what do you want?" she said, allowing us to stay at the entrance, seemingly not wanting my mother-in-law to be aware of Robert's unexpected visit. "Is that you in these pictures? Who's the man next to you?" Robert asked, confronting his wife with the photos. "Where did you get these? No way." Mary was shocked upon seeing the photos. "Do you remember?" "Well, who is this?" "Answer me." Robert, usually mild-mannered, pressed his wife. "Just a friend." "Can I have young friends?" My sister-in-law retorted, defensively. "Don't lie. I know everything." Robert yelled at her. "Why? Who told you?" Realizing my sister-in-law could no longer continue her lies, she looked defeated. "Your late brother James was concerned about your spending and had it investigated. Robert calmly revealed the truth. You demanded money from your mother and squandered it all on a nightclub. I'm aware of the entire situation. Robert continued, trying to contain his anger. It's hard enough to pay for Alex's tuition, and you exhaust our living expenses and still dare to ask for more money. What a comfortable life, huh? He continued, his voice filled with rage. His anger did not subside. That's enough. I don't care if you leave us. We're getting a divorce, he coldly declared to her. What? My sister-in-law muttered in shock. Didn't you hear me? We're getting a divorce. I'll send the divorce papers later. Fill them out and send them back, Robert stated bluntly. At those words, my sister-in-law collapsed onto a seat. Later, my sister-in-law and Robert proceeded with the divorce through a lawyer and ultimately finalized it. They agreed to consider her spending at the nightclubs as a reason for compensation and to share the payment of Alex's tuition until his university graduation. However, there was a possibility that she might default on the payments, so they agreed that a lawyer would collect the payments monthly. After receiving her share of my father-in-law's inheritance, my sister-in-law had squandered it all on her expenses at the nightclub and then set her sights on my mother-in-law's property. But she found the bank account balance to be lower than expected, and her plan failed. In fact, it seemed that the money James and I had been giving my mother-in-law was used for living expenses and given to my sister-in-law as she demanded, leaving almost no savings behind. My in-law's house belonged to my mother-in-law, and there was probably no more money left to give to my sister-in-law unless the house was sold. I learned from the caregiver that my sister-in-law, realizing her failure, had abandoned my mother-in-law and left. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law continued to live a modest life alone with the help of the caregiver. Are you the reserved guest I was hoping to speak with? I have something important to discuss with you. Would you mind sparing a moment? As I was about to enter the restaurant, a woman in a chef's attire with a tense expression approached me. I was curious about what she wanted to confer regarding my meal. As I listened to her, I was hit with a shocking revelation that made me go pale. My name is Emily Thompson, 31 years old, working in the advertising industry. I work hard to create better advertisements. A challenging but rewarding job. My husband, whom I met through work, is named John. He's a year older than me, and we've been married for a year. As a dual-income household, we share our household chores and manage our lives quite efficiently. Initially, our interactions were work-related, but over time, we started having more personal conversations and grew closer. I realized we had similar interests and values, and I started developing feelings for him. When our collaborative project was coming to an end, fearing that we might not see each other often afterward, I mustered the courage and confessed my feelings to him. Although I've dated before, this was the first time I ever confessed my feelings to someone. I was nervous, but he accepted my feelings, and we started dating. After a year, he proposed, and we got married. Before marriage, John revealed that he had been previously married and divorced. They were married for about a year, had no children, and mutually decided to part ways due to differing values. It seemed like John regretted not being able to make his previous marriage work. He seemed a bit reserved when it came to love, probably because of his past experience. I understood. As long as there were no lingering issues, I didn't mind his past. It wasn't about wanting happiness for marriage, but wanting to live my life alongside John. So I accepted the fact that John was divorced and went ahead with the wedding. Our married life was filled with happiness, but slowly, the real implications of John being divorced began to unravel. After our wedding, we moved to an apartment close to both our workplaces. John's parents live nearby, and we get along well. Our married life has been smoother than I anticipated. Initially, I had concerns about living so close to my in-laws, fearing potential conflicts, but they were always kind to me. Given our work schedules, John and I hardly have time during the weekdays. Still, we make the most of our weekends together. We both enjoy eating and often cook dishes we want to try at home. Ideally, dining out would be great, but I have an allergy to fruits from the Rosaceae family, so I can't casually eat out. Even when I think a dish doesn't contain these fruits, they might be used as a hidden ingredient, making it tedious to constantly check with restaurants. Even a slight touch causes my skin to turn red and swell. I feel bad asking about ingredients at restaurants and have developed an aversion to dining out due to this. I developed this allergy as an adult, and initially, I was taken aback since I hadn't anticipated it. I reminisce about a time when I used to indulge in strawberries frequently. However, my joy turned to despair when my mouth swelled up during an allergic reaction, making breathing difficult. Subsequent hospital tests revealed my allergy to fruits from the rosy family, eliminating favorites like strawberries, apples, pears, and peaches from my diet. Encountering hidden allergens in seemingly safe foods discouraged me from dining out and made me wary of ready-made meals or snacks, introducing an element of stress into my life. Possibly influenced by the initial severe reaction and the sorrow of abandoning my beloved fruits, I became excessively cautious, meticulously checking ingredients during meals with my husband while we were dating. Though my constant checks made me feel apologetic, I couldn't find ease without thorough confirmation. Despite this, my husband and I continued to enjoy our love for food by selecting ingredients and cooking together, alleviating my excessive worries. Thankfully, both my husband and his parents understood my allergies, easing the mental burden I felt after getting married. My mother-in-law, especially, with her profound understanding of allergies due to her father's severe wheat allergy, went above and beyond to ensure meals were safe for me. She researched my allergy, taking extra precautions during our meals together, whether at home or when dining out. Her reassurance, "You shouldn't have to be scared during meals. I'll make sure everything is safe for you," nearly brought me to tears. I developed a strong and nurturing relationship with my in-laws, particularly my mother-in-law, who treated me like her own daughter. The initial concerns I had about my allergies had vanished. One day, after a successful work project earned me a promotion, I shared the joyous news with my family, who were all thrilled, especially my mother-in-law. During our time together, she generously invited me to celebrate at an upscale restaurant. Hesitant about the extravagant gesture, I expressed concern about the restaurant's frequent use of fruits from the Rosie family, to which she insisted on treating me genuinely happy about my promotion. Her sentiment touched my heart, but I hesitated. The upscale restaurant, located in a luxurious hotel nearby, was a place I had always dreamt of visiting since my student days. However, my reservations were not only about its opulence, but also the restaurant's consistent use of fruits from the Rosie family, to which I am allergic. Despite having informed restaurants of my allergy in the past when dining out with my mother-in-law, each time was met with a mix of cautiousness and uncertainty. I grappled with guilt whenever I had to request accommodations for my dietary restrictions, so we typically chose restaurants that rarely featured my allergenic foods. Concerned that informing this particular restaurant about my allergy might inconvenience them due to their frequent use of those fruits, I hesitated. While dishes without these fruits were deemed safe, the thought of potential cross-contamination in the kitchen unsettled me. Ultimately, I declined the offer due to my apprehensions about a potential allergic reaction. Despite my reservations, my mother-in-law was enthusiastic about the idea. "I'll inform them about the allergy when I make the reservation. Don't worry, I also have a connection there, so they'll take good care of us," she assured me. Surprised by this revelation, I had never heard either her or my husband mention this connection before. However, I assumed it wasn't something she boasted about. Intrigued by her excitement and genuinely interested in the restaurant's cuisine, we decided to have lunch there together, trusting in my mother-in-law's considerate approach to my allergies. Feeling relieved, I thought there was nothing for me to worry about since she had taken care of the reservation. When I shared the news with my husband, he was surprised by his mother's connections at the restaurant. He also mentioned the restaurant's occasional inclusion of fruit in their dishes, appreciating their consideration for allergies. When I informed him that my mother-in-law had already conveyed my allergies during the reservation, and that they would take precautions, he seemed relieved. "It's a celebration of your promotion, right? Make sure to enjoy yourself he urged, sensing my anticipation for this special day. Initially hesitant due to my allergies, I had always admired the restaurant. Excitement filled me as the day I had eagerly awaited approached. Taking a half day off on a weekday, I planned to head straight to the high-end restaurant. Opting for a more formal outfit than usual, I paid extra attention to my appearance. Colleagues noticed my attire and inquired about my plans. As I shared details of the upcoming meal, they wished me a good time before I left the office with excitement. Upon entering the hotel, I found my mother-in-law already waiting. The two of us made our way to the restaurant on the first floor, where our reservation ensured prompt seating. Although our reservation was for 1:00 p.m., the bustling lunchtime crowd meant there might be a slight delay in service. Understanding the popularity of the high-end restaurant, I decided to order drinks for the time being and wait patiently. Having finished work and spurred on by my mother-in-law's encouragement, I opted for champagne. As we waited for our meal, we engaged in delightful conversation. While I had tasted champagne before, the one I had that day seemed to surpass all others. The effects of the alcohol, combined with the anticipation of dining at a cherished restaurant, had me in high spirits. Observing the dishes at neighboring tables only heightened my eagerness for the culinary experience ahead. The sight of the delectable dishes heightened my anticipation for the upcoming meal. Suddenly, my phone rang from within my bag, reminding me that I hadn't turned it off during the meal with my mother-in-law. Attempting to silence it, I noticed the incoming call was from work, instantly sobering me up. Concerned about a potential issue, I excused myself from my mother-in-law and stepped out of the restaurant to answer the call, ensuring privacy for any sensitive information. The call pertained to a document I had submitted earlier that day, and my colleague urgently sought clarification. Relieved that it wasn't due to an error on my part, I addressed their questions and concluded the call within about 5 minutes. As I prepared to return and relished my meal, an unfamiliar woman, dressed as a chef from the restaurant's kitchen, approached me in a rushed manner. With a concerned expression, she urgently instructed me to leave the hotel immediately, stating it was dangerous to go back to the restaurant. Intrigued and suspicious, I sought clarification, and upon understanding the situation, I swiftly hopped into a waiting taxi and headed home. Later that evening, my mother-in-law called, expressing fury about my abrupt departure from the hotel without explanation, causing embarrassment as she had reserved a special course for our celebration. Her anger, unlike anything I had witnessed before, took me by surprise. Previously perceiving her as kind and gentle, her current demeanor made me question that belief. While I expected her to be upset if I left without saying anything, her furious yelling, intense and relentless, fueled doubts. She berated me, even criticizing my parents and how they raised me, making me question my suitability as her son's wife. In the midst of her tirade, I remained silent, contemplating the unexpected turn of events. Despite her anger, a part of me still clung to the belief that the kind and concerned mother-in-law I had known would express worry about my well-being. As her outburst continued, I couldn't help but wonder if the rumors circulating about her had some truth to them. Eventually, after a prolonged scolding, she seemed to calm down, though still visibly upset. I cautiously raised a question, breaking the tense atmosphere. "You mentioned informing the restaurant about my allergies when you made today's reservation, ensuring I could relax. However, it seems the restaurant wasn't aware of my allergies, and I ended up with allergenic ingredients in both the main courses and the dessert. These ingredients were concealed in marinades and sauces, not immediately apparent. The woman who approached me earlier took the reservation call from you, my mother-in-law, and mentioned that no mention of my allergies had been conveyed. She explained that, upon noticing the allergy badge on my bag, she decided to double-check. As the chef responsible for our meal that day, she immediately recognized the presence of allergenic ingredients. She emphasized that had she not intervened, I would have unknowingly consumed the allergens, leading to a severe allergic reaction. Initially, I hesitated to believe that my mother-in-law would intentionally expose me to allergens. However, The woman's sincerity and the fact that she took time from her busy schedule to inform me quickly convinced me. The revelation took an unexpected turn as she disclosed her knowledge of my mother-in-law's true nature. Surprisingly, she deduced that my mother-in-law was the ex-wife of my husband, and she now worked under her maiden name, Kate Young. Recognizing me as the new wife, she decided to help me. She explained that, having been through a similar experience, she believed my mother-in-law wouldn't have female friends, especially someone of a similar age, after getting married to my husband. The woman shared her own experience of mistreatment when she lived with my husband's parents before they married. Despite initially perceiving my mother-in-law as gentle and kind, she faced constant criticism for her housework and snide remarks when my husband or father-in-law wasn't around. Even with her culinary skills, acquired from attending a professional cooking school, the mother-in-law found faults in her dishes, sometimes discarding them. Feeling trapped and unable to gather evidence, the ex-wife fled through divorce, later using her culinary license to secure employment at the restaurant where she currently worked. As she matured into a seasoned chef, my mother-in-law discovered her working there and started frequenting the restaurant. Realizing her ex-daughter-in-law's presence, she discreetly demanded discounts, leveraging past traumas. The connection my mother-in-law spoke of referred to the ex-wife, who had silently endured the mistreatment and humiliation for years. When I questioned my mother-in-law about why she hadn't communicated my allergies to the restaurant, she feigned ignorance, insisting, "I knew about your allergies, so I must have told them. Maybe it's the staff's oversight." In her defensive stance, she shifted the blame onto the restaurant staff, suggesting that it might be their mistake. However, given that the reservation call was handled by the ex-wife, who was currently working at the restaurant, it seemed plausible that my mother-in-law deliberately omitted mentioning the allergies, intending to later blame the staff. Aware of the restaurant's strict guidelines on allergies and their record-keeping practices for dispute resolutions, I was quick to see through her game. I confronted her, emphasizing that, if properly informed, the restaurant would have accommodated my dietary needs, and the recorded calls could easily verify who was at fault. Faced with this revelation and the prospect of recorded evidence, my mother-in-law, who hadn't anticipated such documentation, fell silent. Persisting, I asked, "You've always been cautious about my allergies. Why did you not mention them this time until now?" Despite her previous concern for my allergies, she remained silent for a moment. When she finally spoke, it was a shocking revelation. "I despise you. You outshine me, and you deserve some pain." Her envy stemmed from my workplace recognition and popularity in the neighborhood, which fueled her resentment. Baffled by her unexpected outburst, I sought an explanation, questioning why she would act in such a manner. After a brief silence, she defiantly shouted her disdain, confirming her jealousy. Shocked by her behavior, I decided to collect evidence to reveal her true nature. In a carefully planned move, I informed my parents of the situation and had John join us. When she called later, I switched the call to speaker and recorded the conversation, capturing her incriminating statements. This revelation caught her off guard, and in a shaky voice, she asked, "Wait, is John there with you?" Unbeknownst to her, John had been silently gathering evidence. He confirmed that he had heard everything and expressed his disbelief and anger. Ignoring her excuses, he declared his estrangement from her. My parents indicated their intention to sue her for attempted murder, and John cut off the call, disregarding her pleas. When John informed his father about the incident, he was furious, leading to the suggestion of divorce. Eventually, they threw her out of the house. With no relatives to rely on, no income, and being a housewife, she pleaded and cried, prompting her husband to provide a basic apartment for her. However, lacking the drive to work, she clung to both John and me, demanding money. We firmly rejected her, urging her to earn it herself. Subsequently, rumors suggested she found work at a nearby supermarket, but appeared disheveled and struggled on her own. I hoped she would work hard to support herself and pay us the compensation. Her nasty attitude made her unwanted in our lives. The underlying reason for her actions became clear: jealousy. She wanted to see me suffer because I had surpassed her in status and popularity. John's ex-wife, who had previously endured mistreatment, became a supportive friend. Despite initially missing the signs of bullying, John apologized to her. She assured him that she was over it and was currently dating someone, ending their conversation on a peaceful note. Settling matters with my mother-in-law, John and his father threw me a promotion party, marking a new chapter where I could focus on my career without worrying about her. Apologies, but we've already left while I was using the restroom at the rest area. A call from Luke interrupted my thoughts, and I answered it, curious about what he wanted at such an odd time. As I picked up the call, I could hear Luke and his in-laws laughing heartily in the background. Perplexed, I inquired about the merriment, and Luke dropped an unbelievable bombshell. They were going to enjoy themselves with the family, and I could head back home and clean or do something else. Despite looking forward to the trip after a long time and having reservations about traveling with Luke's family, I was excited about staying in a luxury inn. It was a huge disappointment to realize that he was leaving me alone at a rest area, especially considering today was not only our wedding anniversary, but also my birthday. The feeling of betrayal was profound as I stood inside the restroom stall, trembling with anger. With a measured tone, I replied, "Okay, unforgivable." Today, on our wedding anniversary and my birthday, I felt a deep sense of regret. I had anticipated a special celebration, but instead, I found myself abandoned at a rest area. My name is Lucy Mitchell, a 33-year-old housewife without children, living with my husband Luke. We got married exactly 1 year ago on my birthday, and Luke, with his romantic nature, always cherished our anniversaries and birthdays. Luke's family, as you might have gathered from the birthday incident, is wealthy. His father is the CEO of Mitchell Securities, and his mother fully embraces the affluent lifestyle. Although Luke occasionally showed signs of being pampered, I knew he cherished me, and that's why I married him. We met through a matchmaking agency, where men from wealthy backgrounds like Luke were popular. Despite initial doubts, our compatibility led to our marriage. Starting our marital life in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city, Luke desired a larger house, but I disagreed. Despite his family's wealth, I felt the large apartment was unnecessary for just the two of us. I suggested living within our means for now, knowing we could always move later. However, in the expensive city, our $1,200 rent made me feel guilty as a housewife. Luke reassured me, saying, "Don't worry about it. My dad will sort it out." Despite being the heir at Mitchell Securities, I wondered about considerations with other employees. I pondered whether this was truly acceptable. However, the following month brought an unexpected increase of $500 to Luke's salary. "Your dad is amazing, being able to raise your salary like that," I remarked. Luke responded, "It was time for a raise anyway. I won't let you face any hardships, Lucy." Despite Luke relying on his father's influence for financial matters, I felt gratitude for the raise and refrained from challenging him. Casually, Luke mentioned, "By the way, I'm having dinner with my parents today. It's just a family dinner. I think I'll be back by 10. Take care." I was taken aback by this unexpected disclosure of a family dinner on a regular evening. In the past, as his wife, I would usually be invited to such gatherings. Not that I sought a free meal, but building a good relationship with one's in-laws seemed essential. Watching him leave for dinner on a weekday, I wondered about the change, thinking it was TIF today. The unease about our new life persisted. Following the dinner incident, Luke frequently visited his parents' house for reasons like a cousin's birthday or a request from his mom. As a first-time bride, I nodded, assuming it was normal. However, during a dinner with a friend, Luke's absence drew a surprised reaction. "He goes home that often, leaving you behind even for a cousin's birthday. That's crazy," she remarked. With 5 years of married life experience, she found Luke's actions unusual. Embarrassed by her response, I admitted, "You're right, it's weird." but according to Luke, it's normal. She pondered, seriously, don't take this the wrong way, but hasn't he really grown up yet? Maybe he should prioritize family affairs more, especially at 35, even if he's set to take over his dad's business after getting married. Her comment resonated, making me question the dynamics of our marriage. I couldn't shake the regret of not recognizing Luke's true nature before marrying him. Returning home after dinner with my friend, a sense of disappointment lingered. As I entered, Luke's mother greeted me with an inquiry. "I'm home, Lucy. Where have you been? Isn't it normal for a wife to cook dinner and wait for her husband?" To my surprise, my mother-in-law was in the living room, and Luke was apparently out, perhaps at a convenience store. "Why are you here? Weren't you and Luke supposed to dine out tonight?" I asked, confused. She explained that their plans got canceled due to an issue at the restaurant, and Luke had messaged me about it just a bit ago. She pointed out that I should have checked my phone. Looking at my phone, I realized that 10 minutes ago, Luke had indeed messaged that he'd be home early. However, that was just about when I got off the train, making it impossible for me to prepare dinner in such a short time. "Yes, he did message, but I saw it just now." This has nothing to do with being raised by a single parent. I just hadn't seen the message yet, I retorted, visibly irritated. However, my mother-in-law brushed off my comment and changed the subject. She then remarked, "Well, anyway, I've always noticed this, but your house is quite small." I defended, "I think it's average and suitable for just the two of us." "You can't be serious." "I feel sorry for Luke living in such a cramped space," she commented. My interactions with my mother-in-law continued to stress me out. Both she and my father-in-law, perhaps due to their wealth, often seemed condescending, leading to a strained relationship. Further conversation was futile, so I silently started preparing dinner. Ignoring me, she turned on the TV. From that day forward, my in-laws started dropping by unexpectedly more often. Even my father-in-law visited a couple of times. Most visits involved complaints about the kitchen's cleanliness or the perceived cramped feeling of the house. They would sarcastically suggest, "You know, we have a bigger house. Why not move in?" Firmly declining each time, I kept these encounters from Luke, as they always occurred when he wasn't home. When I once talked to him about it, his reply was, "Why not? Why is living together a bad idea?" I felt disheartened when Luke suggested moving in. From then on, I realized there was no point in discussing it with him, and I endured the situation on my own. Soon, we would be celebrating our first wedding anniversary, coincidentally on my birthday. For your birthday this weekend, I'm thinking of celebrating more grandly than last year. After all, it's also our anniversary. Luke, returning home tipsy from work, announced as he looked at me. Seeing his flushed face, I couldn't be sure of his sincerity, but knowing his penchant for celebrations, I felt a hint of excitement. "Last year, you treated me to a delicious dinner, which was more than enough," I replied. Luke, however, insisted, "That's nothing compared to what I've planned. Let's go on a family trip." The term family trip sounded odd for just the two of us. Noticing my confusion, Luke continued, "My parents, cousins, uncles, and all will join. We're heading to a luxury resort in Palm Springs." "Why Palm Springs and all those people?" I questioned. Luke brushed off my concerns, saying, "Got a problem with a family trip? Or is it Palm Springs you're not keen on?" "No, it's not that," I replied. I couldn't understand why my birthday and our anniversary would involve his family, who had nothing to do with either occasion. I couldn't grasp Luke's thought process. While the choice of Palm Springs puzzled me a bit, it wasn't a major issue. "Sounds fun, right, Lucy? Sometimes you gotta let loose and enjoy." Luke, in his intoxicated state, grabbed my shoulders, and I found myself nodding in agreement. For the next week, I couldn't get the trip out of my mind. Initially skeptical about going with his entire family, as Luke said, "It's a rare vacation, and I should make the most of it," my excitement grew during the trip preparations. Despite the anticipated snide remarks from my in-laws, I vowed to ignore them completely, Finally, the awaited Saturday arrived, and Luke and I headed to his parents' house, our meeting point for the trip. "Well, Lucy, you're late, aren't you? Do you even realize you're the star today?" In front of the assembled family, my mother-in-law was quick to throw shade. However, it seemed she did acknowledge that I was supposed to be the star, taking the edge off her words a bit. "I'm sorry, there was traffic," I explained. Excuses weren't accepted, and we were urged to leave soon to avoid being late for our luxury resort. Despite their grumbling about our tardiness, it was tolerable, given that such remarks had been a constant throughout the past year. Luke's cousin, appearing much younger than him, with a sinister look in his eyes, caught my attention. I couldn't help but wondered if everyone in this family was inherently mean-spirited. My paranoia felt somewhat justified when one of them made a belittling comment, labeling me as Luke's wife, not what I expected. Deciding to avoid fueling further nitpicking, I diverted my gaze, choosing to show a mature demeanor. Expressing my excitement, I mentioned having been to luxury resorts multiple times. As we discussed the current place costing $1,000 per person, the figure of $11,000 for tonight's destination shocked me. A sudden thought crossed my mind. Could it be true? Climbing into my in-laws' car, the journey to our Palm Springs destination was expected to take about 2 hours. Deciding on a short break at the next rest stop about an hour into our journey, I excused myself, heading to the restroom. My mother-in-law waved me away dismissively, and I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me, or perhaps just my imagination. Inside the restroom stall, I took a deep breath, feeling relieved that the trip had been relatively uneventful so far. Hoping for a smooth remainder of the journey, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Expecting Luke to ask me to pick something up, I casually answered the call. "I'm still in the restroom, Luke," I said. With what sounded like amusement, he replied, accompanied by the laughter of my mother-in-law, "Sorry, but we've already left. This trip is just for the Mitchell family. You should go home and clean, Lucy dear. It's a pity, but you'll have to stay behind. Goodbye." Stunned silence followed on my end, while laughter echoed from their side. Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" Luke explained, "We're going to have fun with our family. Today's trip is just for the Mitchell family. It's a pity, but you'll have to stay behind. Goodbye." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been eagerly anticipating this trip, and although the idea of his family joining us was a concern, the prospect of staying at a luxury hotel had excited me. Now they had left me alone at the rest area, and I was trembling inside the restroom stall, feeling utterly betrayed. Trying to hide my anger, I responded with a light, "Okay, unforgivable. Today was our wedding anniversary and my birthday, and they'd brought me on this trip. I'll make them regret this." After leaving the restroom, I was determined to address this betrayal. I made a call, and the person on the other end was shocked, sharing some astonishing news. Surprised, I asked, "Really?" And they responded with a definite yes, promising to come pick me up. The person on the phone left me alone at the rest area, making the situation unbearable. Praying for a timely rescue, an hour later, my uncle arrived to pick me up in his car. Expressing my apologies for troubling him, my uncle reassured me, "It's okay. It's quite an unfortunate situation." As we drove, I explained, "Yes, they're headed to a luxury hotel in Palm Springs." My uncle tilted his head in thought, seeming to realize something. I confirmed, "I think that's the case." Feeling helpless, I asked, "I'm really sorry, but can you please take me there? I'll take the train back." My uncle gladly accepted my request to go to Palm Springs, and about an hour later, we arrived. In front of us was a luxurious inn with a grand gate, a well-known hotel that cost $1,000 a night. At the reception, I was told, "Dinner starts at 6:00 p.m. Please follow me." The person who greeted me with a smile was my mother. I exclaimed, "Lucy, it's been a while." Dressed in an elegant outfit and smiling gracefully, when mother's demeanor might seem somewhat formal to others, but it was undeniably my mother. This inn had been run by my mother's family for many years, and she currently held the position of the innkeeper. After becoming a single mother, she began working at this inn, making it feel like home to me. I had called my mother from the rest area and was surprised to hear that there was a reservation today from the group at Mitchell Securities. I had a suspicion when I heard they were going to a luxury hotel in Palm Springs, but I never imagined they would be coming to our very own inn. Of course, the family didn't know that this inn was run by my mother. Still processing the revelation, I knew I couldn't let this terrible story slide. "Yeah, I know. That's why I came here," I replied, determined to address the situation. "Certainly, let me get you changed over here," I said, preparing to greet them at the dinner table. An hour later, at 6:00 p.m., the in-law family gathered for dinner. To remain unnoticed, I hid in the next room and slightly opened the door to observe the inside. The spa appeared amazing, and the thought of being there every day crossed my mind. If it were closer, we could indeed come every day. At the very least, if you become the CEO, we could afford to come here anytime. I'm looking forward to that. I mean, the subordinates handle all the work anyway. I want to become a CEO soon too. Luke and his family, thinking they were among themselves, made some rather crude remarks. However, when my mother appeared from the other side of the door and greeted them, the room went silent. "Today, I will be in charge of serving you. Please let me know if you need anything," my mother said, bowing with perfect grace. There was a tangible tension amongst the family, but when the food was served, they resumed their inappropriate discussions. For a while, both my mother and I did nothing, simply watching the plates empty before them. It's great that we all could come. We got rid of the bothersome daughter-in-law, and the food is delicious, perfect. "If you say that, she might get angry, you know?" Luke's family continued with their harsh words. "It's fine. She's not really one of us, to be frank. After all, it would be a shame to have a child from a single-parent family in our household," Luke's mother-in-law remarked. Hearing her harsh words, my frustration reached an almost uncontrollable point. At that very moment, my mother entered the room with a dessert plate loaded with cake and fruit. "Today, I've heard it's Miss Lucy's birthday and also her wedding anniversary with her husband. May I know where Miss Lucy is seated?" my mother asked, addressing the family. In response to my mother's question about where to place the cake, the family looked at each other confused. Nobody had informed them. "Did Luke call?" my mother questioned. There was an awkward silence in the room, and the in-laws exchanged glances. In the end, the mother-in-law raised her hand, admitting, "I am Lucy." I was too embarrassed to mention it at this age, but thank you all for the surprise. Given that the only woman in the room was the mother-in-law, her reaction seemed appropriate. However, my mother gave a faint smile upon seeing her act. "Hey, what's so funny? Is it strange to be surprised at my age?" the mother-in-law questioned. "No, not at all." "I wasn't thinking that," my mother replied. "Then what?" "Just bring the cake already," the mother-in-law demanded. "Yes, but before that, there's something I'd like to share," my mother said, interrupting, as the irate mother-in-law barked at her, causing my mother to compose herself. I took a deep breath and swallowed hard, preparing to reveal a truth that would change the dynamics in the room. "Lucy Mitchell is my daughter," I declared. The atmosphere shifted as everyone present made dumbfounded expressions and raised their voices in shock. Seeing an opportunity, I swiftly opened the door from the adjacent room and stood next to my mother. "Welcome, this innkeeper is my mother. It's a pleasure to meet you," I announced. Luke exclaimed, "Lucy, why are you here? And what do you mean she's your mother?" I clarified. "It means exactly that. This inn belongs to my family, and I also intend to take over this place someday." In truth, Luke had never met my mother before. Part of it was due to her busy schedule with the inn, and Luke and his parents insisted on not meeting her face to face. Despite our wedding introduction call, Luke had never met her in person. "From your conversations earlier, could you please refrain from mocking and belittling my mother for being a single parent?" I requested. Luke's family defended themselves, stating, "We just stated the facts." Exasperated, I let out the anger that had been building up. If I have any grudges, it starts with you, Luke. I thought you were a good person when we got married, but it turns out you're a mama's boy. You married me, so you should prioritize me above all else. Don't join forces with your parents to mock me. Faced with my undeniable logic, Luke was rendered speechless. My mother listened quietly to my outburst, and the in-laws seemed oblivious to the extent of their disrespect. I continued, "Why do you treat me this way? If you find me such a nuisance, I can leave the Mitchell family right now." Luke and his mother sneered, suggesting I become a lonely, poor single woman. Looking back and forth between my mother and me, I stared back fiercely. "It's okay. Actually, I'm pregnant, so I won't be lonely. And if I inherit this inn, I won't have any financial worries." I found out I was pregnant last week, and I hadn't told Luke yet. Only my mother knew, which is why she wasn't surprised. The family's tone immediately changed upon learning about the pregnancy. However, I couldn't stand their fickle and unreasonable behavior any longer, shouting, "No, my decision is final. Let's proceed with the divorce through lawyers. I will live happily with my child and my mother." I opened the door to the hall they were in and left. The door slammed shut with a sharp noise. I declared, "I'm done with this. My child will be happier without that family." Despite over 30 calls a day from Luke and his parents, I blocked all their numbers. A few days later, I received a letter from Luke informing me of our official divorce. The letter expressed regret and pleaded for me to return, but I ignored it and tore it up. I decided that being alone and lonely would not be my fate, and I wanted Luke to enjoy his bachelor life. Currently, I am nurturing my child in my womb and discussing future plans with my mother. Once the child is born and grows a bit, I plan to send them to daycare and join the inn's business. The path to becoming the next innkeeper is long, but I am determined to work hard